pandemic has taken the lives of hundreds of thousands of our loved ones and impacted many more, with communities of color disproportionately bearing the weight of both the health and economic crisis. It has exhausted us and pushed our limits. But in the middle of the storm, we've also found the true meaning of resilience. We discovered unity in keeping apart and strength in our solidarity. That is why the Immigrant Worker Safety Net Fund was born. Because true resilience is not how we individually recover from difficult times, but how we use that self-power to create and heal our community. Thanks to your generosity, we have distributed $2,125,000 that ensure direct cash assistance for food, rent, medical expenses, and basic necessities needed into the hands of almost 9,000 immigrant workers and their families in 24 states and 58 cities. Thank you for using your power for showing that social distancing does not mean indifference. But almost a year after the start of the pandemic, immigrant workers and low-wage workers continue to expose themselves in order to provide for their families and continue to be excluded, so our job is not done. Will you support us in continuing this work?
Mi trabajo ayuda a este país de una forma que lo clasificaron esencial. Nosotros reparamos tuberías, instalamos el agua, el gas, toda la tubería que llevan las escuelas, los hospitales, las casas, los edificios, oficinas, fugas de gas, de agua, por eso nos clasificaron esencial. Yo soy un plomero. Los drenajes que se rompen, las fugas de agua, de gas. ¿Cómo me siento yo sabiendo todo esto? Yo me siento impotente y a la vez triste al saber que los inmigrantes no somos contados en los fondos de ayuda del gobierno federal. Es muy difícil conseguir trabajo en estos tiempos de pandemia.
Thank you, Endalam. Good afternoon and welcome to Pop Talk. I'm Hannah Petrie, Unitarian Universalist minister and proud board member of POP. That's Pasadena's Organizing for Progress, the grassroots organization leading Pasadena to become the model progressive city of the 21st century. My co-host, Ellen Snortland, is an author, filmmaker, and columnist for the Pasadena Weekly. Today on our show, we interview Sheri Bonner, President and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Pasadena. It's Women's History Month, after all, and women's access to healthcare and safe and legal abortion has a special place in history because it continues to unfold as states chip away at abortion rights in states like Oklahoma, aiming for a Supreme Court case. We are pleased that Sheri has taken the time to give us an update. Sheri, welcome to Pop Talk.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Okay, I'm just going to cut to the chase and jump right in. Just to let our audience get to know you a little better, what made you so passionate about this topic? And how did you get started with Planned Parenthood?
Well, it was just been a couple years ago, like 31 years ago. I started as a volunteer and I was escorting women who were seeking access to healthcare, abortion services, and were faced with protesters who were basically blocking their entry to access, legal services that are part of healthcare. And so I got involved in that way. And I think I just come from a mom who always felt that women and people should have agency over their own bodies, and a lot of our rights start with, the person. So that's how I got involved and started out at the Planned Parenthood affiliate that is in San Diego, Riverside, and Imperial counties. And I worked half of my career there and then came up and saw Pasadena and this amazing San Gabriel Valley. And my husband and I fell in love with it. met you early on there, Ellen, and thought what a great activist community it was. And also knew that the communities that we served, of which there are 24 in the San Gabriel Valley, really didn't have a strong Planned Parenthood presence. And so I was very intrigued to get our services into neighborhoods. That's how we work best, is if we are, down the street, around the corner, very accessible for people to come in for same day, next day services. So that's how I got engaged, and I'm very passionate about it to this day, and won't leave. I'll have to get a crowbar and get me.
Yeah, I mean, come on, it's a fundamental right to determine what happens with your own body, right?
Yes.
Can you give us a bird's eye view, or I know this is a huge question, but give us a bird's eye view, a state by state kind of state of the state of reproductive health in our country?
Well, what I would say is that we have a change in administration. We have certainly seen a lot of activity for anti-women's and LGBTQ people's health over the years. And certainly as this administration has changed, we're seeing stepping up now of many anti-abortion. I mean, there are anti-access, anti-funding of women's health organizations, reproductive health organizations across the country. We're certainly seeing, I think there's hope in that there's been a change to a more conservative Supreme Court. So getting a bill that the Supreme Court will take that will add a challenge to Roe v. Wade, or some of the other SCOTUS landmark bills that have been passed that provide protections for people who are accessing abortion care in their communities, whether they be how long you have to wait before you can access abortion, to how wide the corridors have to be in your health center, because we are looked at in what they're trying to do is, we call these trap laws, but they're intended to make the regulations so onerous that it's hard to keep abortion services available. And we have certainly seen this in many states. And it's, a lot of it comes down to funding and what it takes for us to be able to continue to provide services. So there's also, you probably have seen that in Arkansas, they have passed a bill, and governor signed the bill that essentially would make abortion services inaccessible in almost every case. So we'll see, what happens with this. I'm sure there will be litigation to pause it. And again, it's a matter of what the Supreme Court is interested in terms of taking a case. And ultimately, Ellen, it's how far they're willing to go to put barriers between women and people accessing abortion, their healthcare, and what kind of barriers they're willing to put, how much they would slow down access, or cost barriers, or showing videos of a fetus that's are really not accurate. There are many ways to get between a person and them exercising their healthcare rights.
Right. It's really a propaganda drive to terrorize women who are vulnerable and don't know who to believe. I think one of the first executive orders that the previous president did was to reinstate the global gag rule. Where is that standing with our current president, our current administration? And can you just give us an overview of what the global gag rule is?
Yeah, it's actually called the Helms Amendment. Goes back 50 years maybe, but it was intended to hold back any assistance, foreign assistance from our government to countries that where their organizations that normally get outside funding, like from the US, if they are providing abortions, even more recently referring people for abortions, they're not able to access these, I mean, life-saving, quality of life funds that come from the United States. It's tended to be now, as each president comes in, depending on their political views, it's turned on or it's turned off. As you can imagine, what that is like to have an NGO and you have your operations set up and your funding streams, you have things set up, and all of a sudden the plug is pulled, and then you have to figure out another operational situation, and then the money comes back, and then it takes you time to start that up. So it's really, I think what we're finding more and more is that these kinds of federal decisions like the Helms Act and the Hyde Act in the United States, they harm the most vulnerable people, you know, who live in our communities. And I believe that's what they're intended to do. There's also a slippery slope with it, but to the extent that, well, you know, no one cares about those people. So it's okay to have these, to not have federal funding with the Hyde Amendment, not have federal funding go to support abortion services. And I think what a lot of us are now finding our voice and finding our courage to stand up for people in our community who, you know, are experiencing low income, are Black and brown neighbors and friends, and people who historically have difficulty accessing care. And so to strip funding, whereas abortion services are, depending on your state, more or less available to people who can afford to pay or have private insurance. You know, this is becoming less and less tolerable for people as we, I think, start to experience more and more that we're all in this together and we're all part of a community. So there's been talk about removing Hyde, which then means that abortion services would be funded by the federal government. And we're starting to see more movement this year than I have seen. It's a tall order. It's a long way to go, but we have to keep talking about it, and we have to keep framing it in the way that it is, which is essentially our country denying access to essential health care for people because they are experiencing low income, they're immigrants. These things fall hardest on people who, you know, already are experiencing more challenging times than many of us who have our own insurance.
Well, that actually is a good segue to my question. I consider California a place where we have full reproductive rights. But is that really true? Like what you're talking about with low income women? I'm wondering how, like even here in California, how can it be yet improved?
Yeah, it definitely can be improved in California. As we think about, I'll tell you about one thing that happened to us this year, and it's because we're have been part of a federal program, that is administered by the federal government and comes into states. And that's the Title X program. And Title X is a very old act that was set up to ensure that basically people had access to family planning, to birth control. May have been in that time an anti-population, or who knows, but it is the thing in our federal laws that specifically provide funding for people who can't afford to pay to access birth control, family planning, cancer screenings, not abortion services, but all the other things around it, and the things that actually prevent women and people from needing to make those decisions. So that the Trump administration pulled Planned Parenthood out of that program. So we have been without, hundreds of thousands of dollars, my Planned Parenthood, that goes to support women who can't afford to pay and don't have another program accessible to them in the state of California. That's a big impact on our communities, and you don't get that back. Those people who need help at that time, they didn't get it. So
is Biden gonna fix that?
Yes, I was very hopeful that he would have fixed it right away. I know this act, the package that he just put together is astounding, and it's amazing, and what it will do for people in our country who are in poverty, and people in low to more moderate incomes. It's the biggest thing in my lifetime of memory, probably since the Affordable Care Act. So really excited about that. He did put more money into Title X. Unfortunately, Planned Parenthood, which you would think would be the perfect match for Title X, because that's who we are and what we do, we're not able to access those funds. So we do hear that help is on the way, and we just haven't experienced it yet. Planned Parenthood is still, per Trump executive order, we are still unable to be part of that program or access those funds.
That is a little distressing for sure. I'm also pretty disturbed and incensed for the women in our country who really can't access local, safe, affordable abortion. What can be done to help them, even though they're in states that are far away? And you mentioned Arkansas, and I'm assuming that's probably where the most oppressive law is at this point. But are there other states?
Yeah.
Are there other states as bad as Arkansas? Or
yes, there are many states that are as bad as Arkansas, and I think what we can do, and we saw a lot of this happening in this last election cycle, was speaking to, now sort of switching to a political frame, is supporting what people did to support Georgia and the people living in Georgia. And you can see the difference that made, and not stopping, continuing to send postcards, continuing to support people getting out to vote. So what a difference that makes. So I think money is always a big deal. Demonstrating that, seeing that organizing has an impact, and so continuing to do that. In California, people look to us as the beacon of light. We can never let that down. Once things fall for us, it's just the dominoes are going to fall everywhere else. So it's really important that people vote, support the legislative, freedom that we experience in California, so women can have access here. But there's still challenges with, for example, we have a very high maternal mortality rate in California that has gotten higher, much higher than in the African American community than in the white community or other communities. Even if you adjust for education and income, there's still higher rates of maternal and infant mortality and medical issues that result. I think more and more we're seeing, and there's research that's being done in the medical community to show that racism and long-term racism, going back generations, as well as current racism, have a pretty big hand in those really sad outcomes that we can put those against many other countries, and we rank low in that area. So when we think about California and the things that we can do, there's a lot to do here. We've had a recent syphilis outbreak that was, and then we had COVID, but a bad syphilis outbreak, and people think syphilis like this is not old. Didn't like artists and die like in the 1800s of syphilis, right? It seems like when you're really old. Well, no, it's back with a vengeance, and one of the big challenges, very easy to treat, but people don't know they have it. And we have found with moms who are pregnant, if they're not tested and treated, we have very bad pregnancy outcomes with the fetus. So something very easy to treat, but not very well known.
Interesting. Just raising awareness about that is helpful.
Yes, raising awareness about that. Yeah. Another thing I would add is that now accessible, certainly at Planned Parenthoods and other providers, is basically HIV prevention. There's medications now that people can take on an ongoing basis if they feel like they are at risk of contracting HIV. And if there's an unprotected pregnancy or rape, we have the morning after pill to prevent pregnancy. We also have medication that someone can take to prevent them from getting HIV. That's highly effective. So, those are things that, again, we're just not aware of, and they're there and available.
Well, I want to go back to our concerns about the Supreme Court. Like, how worried should we be about the future of women's reproductive health if a case went there?
Well, I think we should be very worried. And I think where people get stuck, I think it's just so hard for 70% of Americans believe that Roe should stand. So thinking that Roe v. Wade would be overturned, people just think, nah, that would never happen, because it doesn't even seem possible that you couldn't access abortion. Yeah. But what's more likely to happen is that we will see that the abortion access will basically go back to the states. Okay. And so then it'll be a state-by-state decision. Who's in the legislature? Do you have abortion access in your constitution in your state? Do you have protections that are already there, or do you not? And what we find is that the majority of states would either make abortion illegal, or they would make it so hard to access that you can't do it. As it stands, we have women and people who can get pregnant that travel across state lines because of I don't know, parental notification, parental consent, waiting periods for people who have jobs that they can't be off work. So we already are seeing people coming into other states that are more friendly to abortion. So I think that is my, and I hate to say it, but I can't imagine that not happening. I really think we are going to see, unless something dramatic happens, that the just the federal protections that are cover every state, including Arkansas,
Right.
that those will go away, and it will be up to the states to make those decisions, or there will be, how Roe currently stands federally, they will allow more and more barriers to be enacted. So instead of a 24, or right now, I know one state is 72-hour waiting periods. I don't know, a week. We have in a few states that, that there are these videos that are shown to women, and they have to watch, and the doctor has to repeat it word for word and say, do you know that abortion causes breast cancer? The things that are untrue. And we could see expansion of that. We could see expansion of these trap laws, which are these requirements around how your facility needs to look, and abortion is safer than a colonoscopy, so it's very, very safe, or what doctors must do in terms of how close they need to be to a hospital in order to admit patients, which is really not necessary. But those are the kinds of things that I think then could be challenged to the Supreme Court, and they'd say, well, we said you could do that. We still kept it legal, but for all intents and purposes, it's not.
I mean, it sounds like we're already there. We're already in a state where, abortion rights are pretty well restricted.
Right, and I think what we also see is that, well, I mean, can you imagine 30 years ago that if someone were to say to you that our rights to birth control would be restricted? I mean, no way, because then, the argument about abortion, well, if you take away birth control, then you're going to have more abortions. They would never go there. Well, they're there. They're doing that, and we're seeing that showing up in religious objections, and what pharmacists can and can't do, what in your private insurance, how abortion can be separated and have a different payment plan for that. The Hobby Lobby case, there's a lot of attacks that are happening on this front, and what we know is that it's really I think it's I have my theories for what it is, but certainly it's part of I believe, broader political strategy, and it's a way to get votes, to get your broader agenda passed. So that's tough, considering if 70% of people believe in abortion access, believe in Roe v. Wade, and yet here we are in a place where, for all intents and purposes, it could be overturned. That's something's out of whack there.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious about national strategies. I know you have your hands full with California and the San Gabriel Valley. How much do you work with the other regions and support their efforts to roll back the restrictions?
Yeah, there's a lot of work that we're doing together, because we know that it's a threat. If it's a threat to one, it's a threat to all. So there's a lot of work that's happening. I think the challenge is that you have the federal barriers that can be put up. So then that depends on your legislature, and then that depends on who gets elected, and then there's the Senate, and then there's the House, right? And then you have it in your state. And it can go from this all, you know, the same houses of government all the way up to who your governor is. Also, who's in charge of your health services administration in your state can also play a role in it, to how, what the ease is to have an ongoing healthcare provision of services versus are there going to be, you know, are they going to put things in your way that make it harder for you to provide the services? So there are many ways, there are many attacks, but we have, we have an amazing leader in Alexis McGill-Johnson. If you have a chance to hear her, if you haven't, a lot of her work has been in the area of equity and belonging. And so she's been looking out for how racism impacts where we find ourselves in terms of who has access to health and care and who doesn't. And she's been involved with Planned Parenthood for years and years, both on the, the services side and also on the separate corporations, which are really more political in nature. So she has a big job to do, but I have a lot of faith in her as a leader to work in concert with us in across the country.
I don't know if you can hear one of my dogs crying in the background or not. That's not me, that's my dog.
I can hear it. Yes, they want you.
That's the thing about Zoom and working at home. It's like you get the whole deal.
Right. It is true. We'll see what happens with my dog while I'm in here.
I've been particularly inspired by the peer programs you have in Pasadena and San Gabriel Valley. How has that shaken out during COVID, and do you have peer help on Zoom? I mean, what does that look like right now?
Yeah, well, it's Zoom. We're Zooming. It's actually gone really well. So the Peer Advocates Program is a program that our education department coordinates, and it's a group of 20 or so people in high school who are interested in sexuality and sex education and consent and relationships, and we spend a year with them, and they learn a lot about sexuality and reproduction, and then they also learn a lot about how to organize, how to be leaders in their communities, to take an issue that they care about and see it through to completion. And this means sometimes, like in the schools, it could mean that they're talking to the principal of their school. They're presenting before the school board. But they take on different issues like consent. They've done things around LGBTQ rights. They've done work around bullying. They've done work around if you are in a high school and you feel that you're being sexually harassed, how do you report that? It's amazing how hard it is to figure that out. So they were able to put up on Planned Parenthood's website how you actually do that I think they did the Pasadena school system. They went before the Board of Education and were able to influence them to have more transparency around what steps you might take. They're very unique, and they learn a lot about being one of our moms said that her daughter had gained so much confidence through the program, which you can imagine would happen as you're thinking that you can make a difference. So they switched to online, and they've been able to continue doing their work. It's just, it's amazing. The other program that we have that we just have started in this last year is called it's a youth advisory board, and it's I don't think it's quite that many young people, but their role with us is to be the voice for us of young people, what they care about, what they're thinking about, what they're talking about, so that then that influences the organization in how we go about our programs. And they also are, they're also reaching out to their friends and doing some research on our behalf as well. But so excited about those programs. I'm glad you asked.
I can see how lit up you are about it. It's like, it's a man, I can't help but think what a difference that would have made to me when I was in high school.
Right. Validation.
Oh my God. And just to have peers that you can talk really to and not be defensive or protecting yourself against judgments, and so great.
Exactly. And that there's probably something in your life that made you uncomfortable as you were, going through all your hormonal changes or relationships. There's so much that we're learning as teenagers and young people about how to navigate relationships. And, and sexuality is a part of that, but it's just a part of that. And we don't have classes in how to have good relationships, how to speak your voice, use your voice. And so you're right, to be able to be with other people your age who you can talk with, and to have a leader of the group, a Planned Parenthood person who provides that, validation about your feelings. Wow.
Yeah. And at the time that I was a teenager, women were not supposed to even enjoy sex. It was like taboo, because I was hot and I was really interested in getting hotter. I don't mean physically, I mean, it's like my hormones were raging as much as boys, but boys will be boys, but the idea of girls will be girls was like not even on the horizon. I
love that, Ellen. Yeah, and I think it's just part of this idea of thinking about what agency you have over your body. And I think for a long time, girls, women have not experienced that. And then we go to talking about what your sexual orientation is, how you identify gender-wise, and we've seen that around 30% of young people they're kind of gender neutral. Like they are saying that they're not identifying with a certain orientation or a certain how they show up gender-wise. There's a lot more what we call gender diversity that I sure would have liked that as I was growing up, to think that you didn't have to fit in this mold or that mold. And you go through different times in your life where you question so much who you are and what you're about, and why might I have a feeling towards someone of the same sex, and what does that even mean, and why might I have feelings about someone who is straight and someone who is gay. And I think we've pushed ourselves into very much of a binary position in terms of sexuality, and I'm loving seeing that young people are just questioning it. And
love it. Oh my, it makes me so happy breaking down all these rigid ideas about who you can love, who you can't love, blah 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 blah.
Right. I know my son went to a Catholic high school, and it was boys and girls. It was both all all genders, I guess. I don't know if we talked about anything besides boys and girls, but anyway, I remember him telling me that there was a guy who they were friends with, and a popular guy, and he just said, yeah, and he's bisexual. And I was like, wait a second. You have a kid in your school who identifies as bisexual and he's okay and he's liked? And he's like, yeah, Mom. I thought, oh my God, stop my beating heart. That's just amazing. So evolution is happening. When I think about being excited about the future, I look at our young people, I look at our peer advocates, look at my son, I look at all these structures that they are willing to just sort of throw down and explore. And I think we're all happier when we can create, and teenagers are testing anyway.
Yeah. And
so,
it's like that our biggest hope is to have our young people push back against religious rigidity and gender roles, which gets driven a lot by the right-wing evangelical movement and like that. I have one more question I have to ask you. There was a lot of speculation that we'd have a baby boom out of the pandemic, which hasn't proven to be true. I mean, if you're with somebody 24/7 and, in a small space, I don't know if you really necessarily want to, make babies. What about the teen unwanted or unexpected pregnancies? Has that gone up or down, or what?
I've not seen any statistics that it has. Some of these things lag, and when you get into more detail, but I believe what the literature is showing right now is that we haven't seen a baby boom because of the economic constraints that people are feeling, that they just can't think about how am I going to support a baby, a child, when people have lost jobs, they don't have what they used to have in terms of hope for the future. At least I think many of us didn't for most of a year.
Yeah.
And from hope comes babies.
Yeah.
Don't quote me.
You have to live into a future that would include children. I have a question for you. Did you get to see the movie Ask for Jane?
No,
it didn't get promoted, and it's very low budget. Oh, sirens.
Where can I watch it, Ellen?
I'll find a link for you, but it was before Roe versus Wade, and there was a group of women in Chicago who facilitated 40,000 safe abortions for women while it was still a crime. And they had a whole system of, you ring the phone, somebody will say hello, and you say, is Jane there? And then they'll go to another line and call you back and make arrangements. And I think they did that for like 8 years. And now you can imagine that Hollywood was not interested in funding that, because of the blowback that would happen. But as bad a movie as it is, production wise, it's really got a lot of heart, and it's really wonderful. I'll send you the link.
That sounds great. I would love to see it. And we are seeing more. We have someone at the National Planned Parenthood who that is her job, is to ensure that information about abortion or birth control or condoms or that it's accurate when it's portrayed in films. And a lot of filmmakers want to make sure that it's accurate. And so we're starting to see it show up more in our culture. And so that's very exciting to see. But, I think we just want a just and fair society. We want everyone to have equitable access to the things that we enjoy. And certainly in my line of work, which centers around reproductive and sexual health care, we want people to have access, and that it be unfettered, and that it and that the shame is goes away. It should be something that we are celebrating, and that abortion is nothing to be ashamed of. 1 in 4 women has an abortion in her lifetime. That's 1 in 4. There's 4 of us, right? I mean, it is a very common procedure, and I don't like that people feel ashamed that they have gone through that. And so that's a lot of work on our plate to do, is to reduce that stigma, and it's part of healthcare.
Well, Sheri Bonner, it's been so wonderful to have you on the show today. I've learned a lot. I learned a few things I didn't know. Did you have any final thoughts to share?
Well, I think, we focused a lot on abortion because that seems to be the part of healthcare that has the most barriers to it. But, at Planned Parenthood, we do so many things. We are part of our community right now doing vaccinations, COVID vaccinations to the public. We're doing them at our Pasadena Health Center. We're doing them at our Baldwin Park Health Center. We've done over 1,000 doses already. And so we feel like we're part of the public health fabric of our communities. And as people are healthy, then they're able to access more of the specific care that we provide. But we also do mammograms. We provide hormonal therapy for folks who are transitioning in our trans care program. There's a lot that we do that is, more than abortion. And certainly, that birth control and STI testing and treatment are a big part of who we are. But it's
Well, I'm very grateful for Planned Parenthood, and it's great to see such a good leader at its helm in Pasadena. We're about at the end of our time. Again, thanks for being on our show, Sheri, and all our listeners. You can learn more about the good work of POP at poppasadena.com. You can find this episode posted on Radio Jornalera's Facebook page. Please share widely, and it will also be made available on POP's website. We thank Radio Jornalera for their tech support and making Pop Talk possible. So, good night, listeners, and good luck.